Afternoon, everybody. It's Carrie Benedette, and I'm here with my co-host Celia Swales this afternoon. Hi, Celia. How are you?
I am very well, thanks, Carrie.
We're doing the Eastern Seaboard again, and our guests today to talk all things diversity and inclusion are none other than Lisa Cox and Kate Hillman. And what a cracking conversation we're going to have today. Lead What Matters, the Human Connection, is a series of conversations that we're having every Tuesday, and we're coming to you via Global Leaders Thrive Facebook page. So we're StreamYarding out, and we're not only going to Facebook, we're also going to YouTube and Twitter. And so we want you, if you're around and you're available, to pop into the chat and have a conversation with us. But we're going to entertain ourselves and our thinking all around what it is that the last 18 months have actually charged us with and given us I think, the effervescence or the fluorescence to actually disrupt some thinking around disability, about diversity and inclusion, what it is about this magnificent workforce that we all make up. We're all stars in the constellation. Globally, we're all leaders. And so how are we going to look back on our last 18 months and really put into place the changes that we need? Because the human connection matters. So that's my lead in. So Lisa, I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about you and what you're currently doing. What's keeping you sparkling, basically?
Sure. Well, I'm in Brisbane, so I'm very fortunate to have not been in a lockdown like some of my dear friends in the southern states. But at the moment, I've been working with a fantastic team at Media Diversity Australia. I'm the Disability Affairs Officer there. And the team have been working incredibly hard on a disability reporting handbook, which is going to all the newsrooms across Australia for all the journalists who want to find the words to report on disability, but just don't know what to say. And I've been there. So I was once a writer without disabilities, but now I'm a writer with disabilities. So I know what to say now, but I was once the person going, shit, what do I say? What words do I use? I don't want to offend anyone. What do I do? So we've put a book together. It's been written by journalists in collaboration with a lot of people with disabilities, a mix of people with different cultural backgrounds, LGBTQ, etc., etc. So it's a big mishmash of people. It's currently with the Human Rights Commissioner getting his stamp of approval. It's a work in progress, as in will be launched on December 3rd, International Day of People with Disability. But that has been keeping myself and the team very, very busy. They have been working incredibly hard at it. So I'm very proud to talk about that today. So that's what we've all been doing in COVID. But to be completely honest, for myself and a lot of people in the disability community, COVID has been much the same as my normal life in isolation. Don't know the difference. So yes, I've missed the gym and pubs and clubs and things like that, but it has been horrible, and I don't want to minimize that. But for a lot of us, it's been very similar to our normal lives.
Yeah, and I think there's pluses and minuses where whichever way we look at this, and I think what we're talking about here is also a mindset, a mindset that has to change, and one that I know, Kate, you are passionate about. So tell us a little bit about you, so anyone listening in can grab that.
Thanks, Carrie, and thanks, Lisa. That's a really interesting observation around, it not varying dramatically for you, and I think something we need to bear in mind. So, I'm interested in these things because I'm what they call the people, place, and culture leader for EY, and that triple barrel title really emerged from COVID. So I used to be the people leader. And I think the thing that we really understood coming out of COVID was that there was work to do because we are living in a hybrid world now. We are seeing people working remotely. We're going to have people with different needs. I'm really mindful of my colleagues who may have a disability or a health risk. That means they're not going to be able to just come straight back into the office like other people, maybe haven't been able to be vaccinated. So we really have to think through, how do we give an equitable career experience to people regardless of where they're working from? And I think one of the things that COVID taught us is how interdependent we all are. But I think the other thing that it's been a real challenge for organisations is, we used to be able to sheep dip everything. Everybody came into the office and everybody did everything this way. And the thing that we've learned through COVID is the individual needs of our people are really different across the board. And I think for me, the real challenge is, we know we're facing into the Great Resignation. Business is booming despite, a two-speed economy. And where are we going to find the talent that we need to drive growth in our businesses, particularly with the borders closed? And will we see a large rush of people wanting to move down here? The anxiety of moving a long way from home, I think, has increased for a lot of people. So I'm passionate about getting the right talent into the business. And I think the diversity agenda is a really important agenda for actually making sure that we're accessing all the pools of talent available to us, and not just the ones that we've all gone to in the past. And again, my business imperative is innovation and growth, and I don't think I can have innovation in the absence of diversity. So it's such an important agenda for us.
Well, I talk a lot about licorice all sorts, and this is by no means any comment on Celia, but Celia's gifts and talents are absolutely amazing. So all together, we're rumbling this afternoon. So Celia, tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
So I spend a lot of time with leaders who have a vision of making a difference in the world, and helping them with the people, aligning the people, and sort of being able to have, in some respects, a lot more robust conversations in workplaces, which to me is highly linked to the diversity agenda, because I read a really lovely paper the other day that said the problem is not about conflict management, it's about managing agreement, because everyone agrees on the surface and doesn't actually share their points of view in order to just get agreement. And so for me, I find it really interesting. What are the things that leaders are going to have to increasingly do to enable conversation that is more robust, and to allow for it, and in a lot of respects have to manage the complexity that comes with that. Kate was talking then about the idea that we now have hybrid workplaces, and we now have this great opportunity where people can say, my life needs to look different, and so therefore I can't be in a central place all the time. And so the sheep dip, I love that kind of sheep dip idea, no longer works. But then how, as a leader, do I actually add that to my way of working and keep the inclusion and the conversation going at the same time?
It's a nice metaphor, the sheep dip, because,
Yep,
we could say that Australia actually became prosperous on the
back of the sheep. Yes.
Yes. And look, I really am very grateful to have you all in the room, having the chat today. I've got a belief that global leaders need to thrive, and thriving isn't easy. We've just been given a great environment in which we've had to find out new ways of thriving for our workplace, for our families, for how it is that we're actually making some money or being able to contribute to society. So my belief is that the leaders that we need to work with are those who are just starting their journey. And our responsibility is around giving them the best possible environment to really think through their leadership, because humans are what matters. The humanness, the human-centeredness of our leadership, having a heart as well as being strategic and focused, for me is just as important. So let's do this. Let's have the conversation around how we create the circumstances, the best place possible to actually build the leaders of tomorrow, because we're going to be in the box a long time. We'll be gone, but there'll be a way that we've been able to step forward together and help create something that's pretty special. That notion of the constellation and all of us shining, well, you know what? Let's bring it to the fore. And we have to discuss. We actually have to have the dialogue. We actually have to think about what you said, Celia, about whether we agree or not. What's not said. Talk about the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
So, you know, let's go. Let's go for it. So, Lisa, I think that your handbook that's ready to come out on the 3rd of December, that's going to be a great day. There'll be a lot of rejoicing. It will be a project of the heart, and as well as a project for humanity, really.
It's written for journalists, but it's really not just for journalists. It's for anyone who writes content that's perhaps going to have a disabled person reading it, which is pretty much anyone out there, who might have to struggle with language, who doesn't want to offend. And like I said, I've been that person who's wanted to write but not knowing the right words to use. I put my hand and I say that was me. So I know how that feels. It's uncomfortable. So even though it is, it has been put together for journalists, it is absolutely appropriate for other business people as well, other business leaders.
Keen for the copy, very keen. Very keen to see it.
Well, you heard it from here now.
Yes, I like the idea that you talk about that discomfort. And I think, you know, when people have a discomfort around raising topics that aren't, you know, usually discussed, that they've kind of got two choices. One is to lean into it and go, I'm going to get this wrong, and I'm just still going to have a crack at leading into it, or I'm just going to say nothing. And I like that idea of, you know, giving people information at that point of discomfort that allows them to kind of move forward in a way that has a little bit more confidence. It doesn't take as much courage, maybe.
Well, we're all noticing, aren't we? We're all noticing some changes in the last 18 months. So I'd be curious to hear some of those, Kate, from your viewpoint, from working with, you know, the people and culture and Oceania, you know, across the world. Basically, you've got a network with Ernst & Young across the globe. Lisa, you have too, with your background. You know, anyone who is a writer, an author and a speaker, with your connections, the same thing. We all have our own networks, but let's see what it is that we're noticing that's different, that we really should be attending to.
Well, I'm certainly noticing that what we're seeing is, you know, it's very uncomfortable for some people. So a lot of people who their work identity has been built the way mine has, turning up to a big office, nice new suit that I might have got when I made partner, people sitting around me who know me and greet me in the morning, do as I ask. You know, all of that's turned on its head, and suddenly, you know, there's this kind of, we're all just turning up on screen. And so one of the things I'm noticing is that there are those of us who really are having our work identity challenged, but I'm also noticing that people that typically might not have been as involved are more involved. So the ability for that equitable connection, because we're all coming in through technology now. And certainly we did some research about 5 years ago that said our top performers live on average 35 minutes closer to their place of work. So I'm really interested to watch over time how the non-location specific element, it plays out across the business, and what opportunities for people who might not be able to live right in the city to kind of lift their performance, or for us to notice them perhaps a bit more because they're not getting in sort of after a 2-hour journey on public transport and then heading out at 5 because they're not going to get home till after dinner. So I think there's some interesting things that are going to play out from there as we see the hybrid landscape really come into its own, hopefully with some better technology sitting behind it.
And what have you found? The thing that I find interesting, of course, is that leadership lens. Is what are the challenges for leaders around managing that?
Yeah, it's really, it's quite challenging to a lot of people. So I think it's that moving away from management of process and output to outcomes. So it's really challenging, sitting with leaders and saying, so what outcome are you expecting from your people? Do you actually understand that? And being able to manage their people through outcomes instead of kind of just, well, they're here at 9 and they're leaving at 9. Probably less of a challenge in my business, but certainly I've seen that be quite a problem across some of my clients. Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, Lisa? That's
I'm thinking back to the learnings that we've taken out of COVID, moving away from that, just from the learnings we've taken out of it, more so around the disability sector, thinking back to a piece I wrote only a couple of days ago for Primer, the microaggressions that not just the disability community, but the COLD community, people, there was generally why people weren't wanting to go back to the office. It was an interesting piece that the journalist had put together. She'd interviewed several women, far more than several, but as excited as everyone was to, regain their freedom, people weren't necessarily looking forward to going back to the office. And they interviewed myself and a lot of other women, and reasons. Mine, for example, was around microaggressions, as well as women of colour for microaggressions and things like that. So I'd be interested in all of your thoughts as to how leaders can handle those sorts of things and what COVID has taught us about how we can better handle that post-COVID.
That is such an important piece, Lisa, and I think one of the things that has been interesting through COVID is we've become much more conscious of mental health and wellbeing and psychologically safe workplaces. It's become a conversation. So before you'd kind of put it out there and get a lot of sage nodding, but people couldn't relate. And I think what COVID's put us through is most people now can relate to what it's like to be really struggling with their mental health. And so we're having more conversations about mental health and therefore psychological safety at work. Certainly there is so far to go on this, as you would know well better than I do. But I think, we've spent certainly spent a lot of time with my organisation with things like developing, so Michael Bunting coming in and talking to Better Me, Better You, Better Us. So really helping people to discover their curiosity, their kindness, their connectedness to others. So we're working very, very hard on that. I think one of the positions I would take is that business was designed over 100 years ago for the captains of industry, and it was very much about that business and its income. I remember Ford saying, customers can have any colour they want as long as it's black. And then we've kind of been on this journey of customer centricity and how do I understand and put my customer at the centre, and we've come a long way with that. I would posit that it's now time to redesign work for workers, and that we genuinely have to start thinking about, how do we create the conditions where everyone can excel, where everyone's well-being is front and centre, because frankly, if we don't do that, we're going to really run into trouble down here. Firstly, we'll have trouble retaining and attracting the people we need, but secondly, we know that when people's well-being is not good and they're not psychologically safe, their performance suffers. So, a lot of this is a pathway to performance in business. And so I'm very keen that we develop new skills as leaders and that we learn to recognise microaggression, that we learn to recognise the discrimination. I think that the overt discrimination is less now, but that's actually more worrying because I think there's a lot more casual discrimination, and that to me is a lot more insidious and harder to deal with. So I think the other part of that is what I would say is sharing the mic, and that isn't asking people who are diverse, whether they're people of colour, whether they have a disability, to talk about those things. I really want to make sure that we're giving the microphone to them to talk about lots of other things in our world and business, so that we actually hear much broader, diverse perspectives on our business and our world, instead of pigeonholing those people into conversations about diversity.
Yep.
Oh, fascinating. Microaggressions made me think about a couple of conversations I've had recently, and somebody said, actually, it's been a relief not to see the same people every day, and I find that I can actually handle them better and have developed some respect for them because I'm in maybe 1 or 2 meetings virtually, and then I can get on with what my job is. But I'm not actually in the physical space of the office where I can actually feel the energy, or I know that I am very aware of maybe some avoidance techniques that I've become quite masterful at.
Yeah.
It's been a fascinating conversation, yeah.
So, and that's also been evident in the school kids as well. There's been a group of school kids who've actually thrived throughout this process because they haven't been in a classroom in that kind of jungle, so to speak. And so I think the challenge then is when we bring people together, what needs to shift and change. And I think that microaggression piece is micro and therefore is easily outside of our vision. And so a lot more of that sort of realization of the impact of, and I always talk about it as people managing their wake, is that idea that as you're going through life, you've got a wake behind you, and we all have a wake. And how do we get reliable data, especially in leadership roles where people don't always feel comfortable saying oi, is that idea of how do we even get visibility of the impact we're having when perhaps the obvious stuff I've changed my words around, but where is the actual experience I'm shaping for people and the environment that I'm providing in leadership for them to be working within.
You're talking self-awareness, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
How aware are we? Yeah.
The example I gave in the article was that I'll roll into boardrooms all the time in my wheelchair, and of course I'm judged on my physical appearance as a quite obviously disabled person. And from that point on, no matter what I say, it always comes with and she's clearly disabled. But on a Zoom screen, I'm only judged by what I have to say and from the neck up, and that's it. So unless I, quite clearly state, and by the way, and my voice is having a bad day, nobody would know the difference. So it's been quite an interesting point to me, because I wrote a few times about it, that I'll give presentations to business organizations, and unless I say to them, this is my medical history, they won't know the difference. But other times it's just been a really interesting journey for me, because I give a lot of live presentations, and you sort of feel the energy in the room as a presenter when you're presenting in the wheelchair to a bunch of middle-aged businessmen going, "Oh, the girl in the wheelchair is present." I can't explain it. I don't want to be derogatory, but you just sort of feel the energy in the room, and you're just not quite taken as seriously, to put it that way, as opposed to when I'm presenting on a Zoom screen, and it's simply what I'm saying, and they can't actually see all of me. It's quite different. And so that was one of the examples that I gave in the article. But it's really interesting what you said about children thriving in COVID. I never thought of that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, anyone who's self-directed, self-motivated, can tune in and focus. Dare I say, anyone on the spectrum.
Absolutely.
They're the kids. They're the kids who have done so well. Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, Kerry. I was talking to one young person, and she said, when I'm in school and and I'm feeling like I'm being pushed on the outer, or I've got to sit there. Whereas on a Zoom call, I can go, I've got to go now, and just turn off my screen. And so you've got much more control over what you were exposed to, and you've got much more, I guess, autonomy to be able to go, this is not okay, and I'm just leaving. Or switching off cameras and things like that is another way for people to kind of just give themselves that space.
I think it's really important, Celia, and I think one of the things that we've been trying to say to our people is, probably don't do more than a third of your day on screen, because it's actually really challenging cognitively. You're actually probably better to do, part of your day just on voice calls. But I think the lovely part about it is that we can come together. Although I was worried, bless you. I was worried when we first went into COVID, because we kept talking about people telecommuting to work. And, I sort of sat with my partners and I said, actually, we're telecommuting into people's homes. And we're going to have people who have got, very humble shared dinks with their fellow students like I had when I was young. And you'll have the partners that have, the grand palace. We have to be incredibly mindful of the fact that we're going into people's homes, and there's a level of respect that we need to do with that. And I think that was really interesting to watch unfold. But the thing I really liked about it was the ability for my cats. I've got cats, so they like to come and sit on my laptop when I'm doing board meetings, and people's children come in, and we stop wearing the giant shoulder pads and all the kind of business uniform. And I think that's been really refreshing, actually, that we actually feel more authentic, even though we're doing it through technology and not face to face. So it's been quite an interesting experience from that perspective.
Yeah. And apart from checking in on how everybody is, I would say that nearly any meeting that I've been part of, there's been laughter. And whether it's because you've got your Ugg boots on, or whether it's because you've got a pair of shorts on and a really nice jacket, or you can do your earrings and Kate, you are so spot on. I think there's been some leveling, and I think most people have been respectful, because you can put on a blurred background. You can actually blur it. You can have, you can actually give your team a choice. You can actually put it out there and say, right, let's all make the choice on how we're going to be respectful of each other. And so for me, it's no different to the bigger workplace, no matter whether it's a news station, Lisa, or the journalists' headquarters, or whether it's your home office, Celia, or, big, nobody's in huge offices around the world to the extent that we were. There are many cities that are back working, but it's not the same amount of people in large city buildings. There's a whole lot of decision making been going on. So really, we have been practicing being inclusive and diverse whilst we've been in this situation as well.
I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I really think there's a lot of opportunity, but I think we've got to improve our technology to make it a lot more inclusive, and particularly for colleagues who may have disabilities that impact the use of technology. I don't feel like there's a strong enough lens on that. I remember the old W3C, I think it was. Lisa, you know better than I, some of the technology standards for making sure that people with disability devices could engage.
My take is I'm useless with technology.
Technology is useless with us, Lisa. That's the way I try to frame it. It's not very intuitive. We've got a long way to go, but that's the exciting piece for me.
Yes.
How do we build it to be more adaptive to us instead of the other way around?
Yep.
We're in an explosion, aren't we? We're in an explosion of AI at the moment.
Yeah.
So to me, get into the conversation about the AI for the best possible use and purpose.
Yep.
So it doesn't minimise or demoralise or discriminate. We can use it to empower. So, great words, Carrie, but you know what I mean. I'm pretty sure we've got access to some pretty amazing stuff that will probably become quite commonplace.
I think the big risk with AI, I think it's a phenomenal capability and very exciting, and take away work that isn't value add for people, and lots of things there. Provide decision-making support to people in really risky roles. There's so much great stuff. But, Lisa, you would be all over this. But I think, the big risk is that algorithms, are largely our brains. And if you have an algorithm that reinforces itself and it's informed by prejudice, or we're
Yep.
going down a really
Yep.
dark road. So we're going to have to be just
Yes.
incredibly alert to that risk. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's even in the I was listening to a person talking around the original facial recognition software that actually didn't do very well with Asian faces and faces of color, and it was and it's like, well, of course, if you're designing something that works for you and it's not a diverse, back to the diversity creates the outcome. If you haven't got diversity in the development of products and things like that, then it's not going to work.
Unconscious bias.
Yes.
It is. So I remember that really, there was a case study done, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, and it was with one of the car manufacturers who developed the voice assisted, and this lady bought one of their cars and it just wouldn't respond to her voice. And when she took it back, they said, get your husband to speak to it. So these are the challenges when you don't have diverse enough teams doing development.
Only this morning I was reading something about digital ableism. And I'm not completely across it, but it's definitely out there, and a lot of people have done a lot more work on it than I have. But there's a lot of information on it out there, both in cultural realms and disability and all sorts of minority groups around algorithms. And the one that I read was around, disabled bodies not showing up in the algorithms and Instagram feeds and things like that. So it's not predictors.
So one of the leadership issues is to challenge our use of technology to be better.
And our design. Yeah, so our use and our design. And I think fundamentally it was the earlier point I was making, if we don't have diversity, then we're really going to struggle for meaningful innovation.
Yeah, maybe not challenge to the use to be better, because it's a great thing. Maybe challenge the leaders to improve their algorithms, what they're doing, rather than us as users have to change our usage and restrict our usage. It can be a wonderful thing, community and support and love and all of those sorts of things. It gets a really bad rap, but I think we should challenge the leaders who are doing these incredibly harmful things with their programming, rather than we change our ways.
Agree. And having enough diverse programmers out there, making sure that it's the new infrastructure of our world, and who's designing that infrastructure.
Exactly.
Make sure it's designed by everyone for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, diverse groups do not just work in the warehouse.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
And
we need to be a part of the conversation, don't we?
Yeah.
We need to not be afraid of the conversation.
Yes.
Well,
yeah. And so what? Kate, that's EY's an enormous workforce. What enables that conversation's visibility and likelihood to occur?
Yeah, so it has to be really intentional, and it has to survive beyond change of leader. So I'd say globally, EY is really committed to this. And again, we're building out systems and processes for it because we recognise that commercially it's a really wise thing to do.
Yes.
So the conversation has been held and the understanding is there that this is important for our business. There's a lot of great intention there. Our purpose is to build a better working world, and by definition, I want that to be for everyone. But I think that you need to infrastructuralize it. So, we have a standing agenda item for our ELT. We have a dedicated D&I community that help us, and that's everything. The ability community at EY, our Unity community, which is our LGBTIQ community, our cultural diversity, which is our different cultural groups. So we're trying all the time to, provide places of gravity for those communities so they can see themselves in our business and know that there is a place and that they belong. but also to harness their voices, just so importantly, to harness their voices to help inform the decisions we make as a business every day. Do I claim we have got that sorted yet? We are on a journey like everyone else, but it is a really important view of the world for us, and a really important business imperative.
And the longer that gets, the more traction that gets, the more likely that it'll bring leaders along, because some leaders will be absolutely leading it forward.
Yes.
And then there'll be other leaders who will not quite understand why this is important and want to write it off as a people agenda or something like that. It's that, I think you mentioned before, that critical mass that allows for then my performance is judged by the capacity that I have to interact.
Absolutely. How diverse is your team? How well, things that we would look across when we're looking through annual performance cycles is, where are our people with English as a second language sitting in that predominantly? How do we understand that? We're very respectful about how we ask questions of our folk around, cultural identity, do you have a disability? It's really important for us to be respectful, but we need that understanding, because that's what helps us know where we need to step in to provide more enablement. But I genuinely think you must set the tone from the top, and you must make sure that you're measuring it, but you've got to hand the mic over to the diverse voices. Because if it's just me talking about diversity, it doesn't mean much. It needs to be the real experiences of our people, and not just, as I say, talking about diversity, talking about their view of working from home, talking about their view of promotion cycles, talking about their view of the market. We just need to hear from much more diverse voices.
Yep, in every conversation.
That's right.
Lisa, is there something that you've now come across, or that you're advocating, that we could really look at for what sort of the leader toolkit or mindset that we need to add or strengthen, perhaps? Perhaps it's there in a small way, but we need to strengthen it. Because the capacity of our leaders is we all talk about leadership development. How do you get that experience? How do you deliberately put yourselves in spaces where you can develop that and challenge your values, the way that it shows up in how you lead? So is there something we need to really amplify, or to perhaps look at slightly differently than we've always done?
This may be something that plenty of people are already doing, but it's been disappointing to see that some haven't, and it's simple, good old collaboration. It seems really obvious, but some hate it, and my way has always been that we rise by, we rise by lifting each other, or whatever the saying is.
A rising tide lifts all boats. Yes.
That's one.
Yes.
It was wrong. But that's been my way of operating, and it's I enjoy working in teams and find that we all are stronger together, and especially working in the advocacy space, when you're not working as a team, and especially when you're all working towards the same goal. It seems silly to not all jump in the same canoe and row together. So to leaders, especially when you're all after the same goal, in whether it be an advocacy space or something else, join forces, however that looks in your particular business or area of work, because another metaphor that I'll throw in, there's enough pie to go around, or whatever the case may be. It's this idea that it's a competition and you'll lose out by sharing your secrets or whatever. That's a lot of BS. You'll actually, by supporting each other, and you actually all win.
Love that mindset of plenty, Lisa. I love that. I think that's so true. I think that competitive mindset, it can be very limiting. I love that. And Lisa, I'd love for me, I'm super keen to collaborate with all the different communities in my organisation, my client base and my community. I think sometimes, the best laid plans and our intentions are we set up a collaboration, but we don't actually collaborate on how's best to collaborate. And we end up with these lopsided collaborations. Do you have any observations or guidance for folk like me that are super keen to get it right?
Sure. Are you talking about collaboration in the disability sector? Okay.
Yeah.
I do when I say do your research, don't just find the first the first person with a disability, because there are lots of us, believe it or not.
So you're not special, Lisa. Is that what you're saying?
Very special, Lisa.
The only person with a disability in this world. It's a big world with lots of disabled people, but it's also very, very small, and we all know of each other, those of us who are. And by that I mean I don't know the first thing about autism. I don't have autism, and I can speak to you all day about representation and the importance of language, but I'm not going to pretend I know how an autistic person wants to be or their preferred language, because that's individual. Every single disabled person has their own preferred language. So don't ever think just because they've spoken to one person, you've spoken to us all. Yeah. That was my first.
One size does not fit all.
That's my first piece of advice. And
Assumptions.
No sheep dipping. And I think that's
there are. If there's one opinion out there, is certainly not everybody's opinion. One of my dearest friends has some polar opposite views to me. We absolutely agree to disagree on language and things like that. I love her to death, but we just agree to disagree on certain words and language, and that's fine. Some people in the sector will not agree to disagree. So that's fine. Everyone can have their own opinion. So just go out there with knowing that it's one person's opinion, and just because they've got one person's opinion, it's not everyone. So maybe get a couple and get a sense for. This seems to be the common theme that I'm hearing time and time again.
Yeah, that's great advice. And one of my lessons, I think, was really understanding. And I still don't, but I'm trying understanding our First Nations landscape. And I often run into people who go, "Oh, well, you've got this person here," and I'm like, it's a whole continent full of lots of different communities, and we just can't pick one person to represent it all. Yeah.
Well, I can recommend to you Media Diversity Australia, this disability reporting handbook that I spoke about.
Yeah.
Prior to that, they wrote a Indigenous reporting handbook, which is exactly the same thing, but for First Nations people. So and I can't say I've read it. So if you want to know things about language and those sorts of things, on the website, which is mediadiversityaustralia.org.au, you can go there and download it. It's all completely free. And again, it's written for journalists, but just skip past the bits that say how to interview a Torres Strait Islander elder or something like that. And it will just give you tips about words and language and what to capitalize and what not to capitalize. And
brilliant. That's really helpful. Thanks.
And it's kind of where that leads me to is one of the things I notice is that we're a very action-oriented workplace. This is the era of action, and that idea of just sitting for a little bit longer with curiosity before you go solving everything. 100%. My favorite phrase is, 100% of people interviewed, sample size 1, say that this is important, And so that idea of actually just stopping for a little bit longer and asking a few more questions of a few more perspectives and different perspectives, rather than just going, okay, tick, we've spoken to Lisa and that's the disability bit, and now we've spoken to someone else and that's the female bit, and is to actually just sit and go, what else is there that we could bring into this perspectives? It doesn't necessarily mean you'll say, well, we have to design 15 different products, but it will actually say, well, on the whole, this thing could be solved in a way like this because we've heard more voices. So that idea of stopping and curiously gathering perspectives sounds like.
I realise, journalists are on deadlines and don't have the time to sit and ponder and
yes.
All those sorts of things. You might only have the time to speak to one. So, and that's where having that database and knowing who to go to if you only have half an hour lunch break or half an hour left before deadline to make one call and get the quote is important in building that database. But if there's something I can help you with after this, by all means, let me know.
Love to have a chat.
Love
to have a chat.
Yeah, so I was just to ask you, then I realised, I can't really do that, can I?
Well, we're talking human connection, aren't we? Lisa, I think you bring up a really good point. Over the last 18 months, we have had regular media input, a variety of avenues, and we've all got our preferences, some of us decided that they didn't need to hear it all, and we've become quite selective in what we were listening to and then where we would direct our energies, the best place for it. But there's a lot of misinformation, and I think that trying to troll through some of the, probably shouldn't have used the word troll, probably trying to work through or travel through some of the information for whether it was engendering panic, engendering, this what I call a contagious, pessimistic view of things. I think that's really critical. So to have really good sources for your media, I think that's critical because their influence is really, really broad. And if we think about how much our lives are spent on those, where is it? Here it is. Are spent on our devices. It's critical, and we want everything so fast. So we've become a very instantaneous gratification. We want to hear what a mirroring of what our thoughts are, or perhaps our way of thinking. So we actually have to challenge the way that we think and way we respond. So, I'm big into this. How do you become more aware of your unconscious bias, and is that affecting how you lead your team, affecting how you lead your family, how you affect your friendship groups, or what? You've got to have friends that you disagree with. I've got some.
Sure.
You've got to have them, and actually, that's what I love it, because there's this whole notion of leading as a host. You set up, you have a dinner party, and I'm home economics trained all those years ago. So give me 100 people, I'll feed you. Don't worry about that. Give me a dinner party, right? So, and plus having a pretty big family, but I love this notion of being the host. It's a metaphor of what do you do to prepare for that occasion. So you've got the people in the room. Who do you put together? Are they like-minded? Are they different? You're going to have sparks. Will you have things being thrown at each other because the conversation will get so intense that you won't be able to manage it? Or, how much time do you sit in the kitchen listening and preparing and letting everybody else take over and generate the conversation? I think it's a fantastic metaphor. And there's a guy that I did some work with, solution-focused coaching work with, Mark McCurgue, and he and Helen Bailey wrote Host Leadership, how to be a host leader, and it's a lovely metaphor. you know, sit in the balcony or go to the gallery, sit out the back and, you know, just be happy that your meal's all ready to go and you just got to get the next bit in. Or who do you invite back to the conversation?
Carrie, it's so important. I think the thing that I see is the real challenge of not being able to sit in inquiry and conversation because everybody wants certainty. And in business, it's like you can't have a nuanced conversation. If you're explaining yourself once it's hit the headlines, you'll never be able to, you know, you'll never get the story back. And I really think that does a disservice to us all. And so, you know, I'm quite proud of EY and that my ELT are very, we learned through COVID that we could have nuanced conversations with people. We chose a very deliberate path through the crisis where we chose not to make anyone redundant and things like that were not easy decisions. But I think that, and then we had some people who were so busy and we needed them to be busy. Then we had some people who had nothing to do. And we said to them, you know, if you can manage it and go to a 4-day week, we'd love that. And it was a really nuanced discussion with our people. But what was so rewarding from that was our people engaged in that discussion with us. We treated them like adults, gave them the respect of the challenges of the conversation. And I think there's a real opportunity there for us going forward is to really start to, as leaders, you know, trust our people with difficult conversations. I think we've got a long way to go there. I think that was one of the really great things that I saw emerge for us through COVID was a much more sophisticated conversation with our people than a set of headlines.
Yep. Oh. And it's right. Yeah, I think that's fabulous. And I suppose that fits with the hosting because you realise that it's not all one conversation. It's actually you're hosting series of conversations to create that.
Yeah. And we have to hear and we have to listen and we have to go back and forth. It's not just me pumping out mountains of emails telling people stuff. It's really how do we create that ability for our community to speak back to us.
Well, is there something we haven't yet said that needs to be said today? Is there something you're burning to say that we've just, I know it's probably looking at a checklist. Have we talked about this and this? However, I don't mean it like that. I just mean from our hearts, is there something there that we need to say?
I feel like we're just at the beginning in terms of the tipping point. It feels like, from my point of view anyway, in the work I'm doing, it's just started to tip over. I've been wanting these sorts of changes to come about for the last decade or so, banging on about it, and everyone was raising their eyebrows and closing doors, and just recently people have been keeping the door open and asking more questions and getting more nodding heads. And I don't know if you're getting the same responses at all, feeling the same way at all, but it just seems like there's a little more of a tipping point now as opposed to the last decade or just in the last maybe 4-5 years roughly. So I want to see more. That's what I was getting at. It's just a start. So here's to another more productive 5 years.
Here's to that, Lisa. I couldn't agree more. I definitely think that you're seeing, you know, certainly some businesses realise the value rather than the niceness of having an inclusive workplace. So I'm really hoping that the pressure on resources in Australia lends its voice to that conversation, which is so important. And I would say the other thing that I'm observing, and I think it's in a strange way kind of contrary to that point, but that we are becoming, in business, I've seen a shift towards kindness. I think that everybody has experienced so much difficulty.
I agree.
Everybody knows someone who's got a mental health challenge because of COVID or is experiencing it themselves. And so the language of kindness is actually coming into the business landscape, which I'm really enjoying. So, you know, as we would say, be kind, be curious, and be connected. And we really want that because that will build life and everything else.
I like that.
Oh, well, it's readiness, isn't it? It's if anything has solidified it for me, it's the time to actually think about what really matters.
Mm.
And we know that the human connection is really what matters. That's what we've talked about today. We've really talked about how do we collaborate to connect with more purpose? How can we host those conversations? What do we need to consider? And I've had a lovely afternoon. Thank you so much for the conversation. You were very generous,
Yes.
Lisa Cox and Kate Hillman, as well as Celia Swales, my co-host. And thank you for connecting and for saying yes. That's you always have to ask the question, and you invite people in, and it doesn't matter if they say no, but I tell you what, it's a fantastic feeling when someone goes, yes, let's do that. So
Thank you for inviting me, and so great to meet you, Lisa. And I'm looking forward to being connected. Yeah.
So Lisa, if anyone's listening and they want to find out more about you, I know you said your home is Instagram. So what's the best connection, address for you? Where would you like?
I'm peppered all around the internet, but I spend most of my time on Instagram at lisacox.co, lisacox.co.
Beautiful.
If you try and send me a LinkedIn message, you probably won't get a reply for 6 months if you're lucky. So
I'm a bit guilty too.
on Instagram, you'll have more luck there.
Well, that's it. That's the place. And Kate, you, I know we can find you on LinkedIn, but do you have a preferred way if people would like to contact you more?
I'm pretty open to how people would like to connect. LinkedIn is universal. I'm not a huge social media person. I do spend a little bit of time, but I'm not an Instagrammable. I'm sorry. Maybe Lisa can help coach me into Instagram. I'm a bit of a dinosaur.
Oh, what? No TikTok?
No TikTok. I avoid dancing in public at all costs.
Oh gosh. And Celia Swales and I can be found on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to find us. But you will find us on various social media. But look, lead what matters, the human connection. This is our second conversation, and I'm so appreciative of the depth and the passion that's behind talking about diversity, inclusion, disability, but it's about how we connect each other and we value the magnificent uniqueness of our own selves and those that we work with, because our thriving matters, your thriving matters, and for leadership for the future that's unknown to us, our leadership is really important, and be able to influence that in this day and age is really critical. So thank you, ladies, for the conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you. Have a lovely afternoon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye now.
See you next Tuesday.
Bye.